Well, we've got this thing pretty well skinned. It looks pretty good. We ran into a little bit of trouble at one of these knots, nothing major, but you gotta be careful around those. I don't really want to cut any deeper. If it was real important to me, what I would do is to sand that off with some sandstone. It's not going to be critical for this video, and you can see a couple places this tree has a scar, even though it's a young tree. This is a scar. I did not cut in here, but there's a scar right there where that tree had got injured somehow. Perhaps an animal came through. There's another one that came off right where this knot was, where this branch was, even though we cut those. So we're pretty well finished with the skinning. There's a little bit here I can clean up. And what I'm going to do now is to get out my saw blade on my SAK. Clean that up where we see that little bit of green left there. And again, we're just going to do that careful at a perpendicular angle. And use a plane. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to cut our ends off. And again, this is a quick bow. This is something that's going to be expedient in the bush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my ends straight or perpendicular to the wood. I'm going to go straight in and just cut off the end of that. Again, I keep my hand well out of the way of the blade. That way I don't get cut. And cut all the way through. I don't want to peel that back because, again, I don't want to get skin to come off. What I'm doing is I'm now got the end of that cut off, and I'm just going back. You can see these little facets as I cut. I'm just going back and I'm cutting through and beveling the end of this stick. The reason that you do that is to keep your wood from splitting. Remember, this is a green bow, and as it dries it's going to tend to split, and if you put these checks at the end of it, it won't split quite as easy on you. So you just go back, and what I'm using here is a push cut. Have my knife firmly gripped in my hand, take and put my finger, and most of the pressure, I'll show you, I just barely hold this blade, most of the pressure is with my thumb. This gives me a lot of control to cut exactly where I want to cut without having any kind of extra pressure or missing the cut, chopping off a piece where I don't want. It's not critical, but the push cut's a good way to use your knife and to make a cut. So now you can see that that end is kind of beveled. You can see the facets in there. Flat cut off with the saw and that bevel. You can also see as we look down this bow that there's a natural curve to that, and I'm going to use that when I hang this bow out to dry for a day, and that will help me to get a curve in there for my bow. But before we can hang it out, what we need to do is where that curve is, you can see if you look down there, that's the natural curve. We need to make a little mark. So what I've done is put a little mark with my knife, and I'm going to bring this down, and where that little mark is, I'm going to turn 90 degrees. On that 90 degrees, now this is going to be the belly of my bow, because that's where that curve was. The curve is bending back. That's going to be the belly of my bow. I'm going to make just a little notch, cut right here into my bow. Doesn't have to be real thick. What we're going to do is to use 550 cord on this. So I'm going to make a little teeny notch, and I'm going to turn the bow over, and I'm going to make another notch exactly the opposite of that notch. These are where my cords are going to lay in and hold the bowstring on for me. You can see I'm making them about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch deep, less than the end of that knife there. So I've made those two notches, and you can kind of see that they come down to a uniform point at the end and on top. And this is the back of the bow. This is the belly of the bow, so you get the idea where those are pointing. On the belly of the bow, they're pointing down toward the handle. Now I'll just take my knife out, and I will go back, and I will cut a little bit off into that, and clean it up a little bit. What I'm just doing here is making a notch again for my cordage. Doesn't have to be deep, just deep enough to hold some 550 cord. But you don't want it real narrow either. You want that cord to stay in there and not come off when you're using it. There's one finished, and then we'll go ahead and do the other. And again, these are just guide holes. They're going to hold that string on top of that cordage so that it doesn't come out of there. Now again, there's different ways different people do this. This is the bottom end of my bow. The natives always shot their bows, to my understanding, by what I've been taught from different natives. They always shot their bow with the bottom of the tree being the bottom of the bow. They did this for ceremonial reasons, for religious reasons. They also did it for practical reasons, being that that's heavier. So there we've got our notches cut out. That'll take our 550 cord. If you really have any problems, you can come back and make a notch across here to hold the back of that, but we won't have to do that. This will be fine as is.